All right, welcome into Ethan Skolnick starting 9 here on a Wednesday morning. I'm back in South Florida. Thanks for joining us. Appreciate it. Manny Chang is the producer today. We're going to talk Dolphins today. I'll slip in a little heat at some point, I'm sure, with them playing the Warriors tonight, although without Steph Curry and possibly without Klay Thompson also, although we have seen sometimes that's not a good thing for the Miami Heat because they let down. All right, we are sponsored today by our friends over at Water Cleanup of Florida. We've been telling you about this one on 5 on the floor. If you have water damage, if you've got mold, if you got fire damage, you need to rebuild, you need to reach out to Michael and his team, okay? Over at 561-408-7835. That's 561-408-7835. You can check them out at Water Cleanup Florida, watercleanupflorida.com. They're based in Boca Raton, but they can service the entire area. We know the hurricane season is right around the corner. So you got to reach out to them before something happens. You don't want to wait until after. Make sure that they're in your phone, okay, and reach out directly to Michael. Again, it's watercleanupflorida.com or Water Cleanup of Florida. And on Instagram by that same name, Twitter, they're Water Cleanup FL. So make sure that you check them out. All right, I come to you today after the Miami Dolphins did something good. And I know there's a lot of episodes here that we've done that are kind of like, what are the Dolphins doing, including the last one? And sometimes I have to remind myself, because I remind others, that you need to wait to see how a process plays out. Because typically, look, every organization, even the bad organizations, and I'm not casting aspersions right here on the Dolphins, but I'm saying just generally, they do have a plan. Like, they typically will have a plan. Now, sometimes it's not a good plan. Sometimes they don't have the people to execute it. Sometimes it's a plan that doesn't really make a whole lot of sense in terms of, this part leads to this part leads to this part. But even in talking to the Miami Heat, sometimes things don't go well, but they talk about, we have a plan after the plan after the plan, okay? That is what separates the good organizations from the bad ones, is not the initial plan typically. It's having plans for when the first plan doesn't work out, okay? So it is clear now, as we look at the entire picture, that the Dolphins had a plan this offseason. And the plan was basically, we're going to strengthen the running game so that not as much rests on our quarterback's shoulders. I mean, if you look at all of the things that they did, they didn't add a huge big play receiver. They added probably a number 2 or a number 3 receiver. But what did they add? They added a couple of fullbacks. They added 2 offensive linemen. Now, and we'll get into Armstead specifically, to man the left side of the line, which will put less pressure on their young guys, okay, and allow their young guys to compete for the other spots as opposed to just be counted on. And, of course, they added 2 running backs who are better than the stable of backs that they had last year. I like Duke Johnson. He's bounced around for a reason, though. And look, Myles Gaskin, I mean, at best, to me, he was always a third down back, who wasn't particularly adept with his vision. And so, it didn't have that one skill that kind of jumped out at you. So they've got a couple of backs now who are more proven, I think, at this level. They don't have a Barry Sanders in there. They don't have an Eric Dickerson in there. They don't have a Ricky Williams in there. But they have a couple of decent backs in Edmonds and Mostert. And you would figure with the offensive line being improved that you would get Tua out of these 3rd and 8 situations that he was in so much last year. So I think when you look at the totality of it, and now you start to say, okay, they signed some average linebackers back. Did they really have to do that? Well, if it didn't affect their ability to get Armstead, I guess it's okay, right, for depth. Because if you look at the Armstead contract, it's not what we were anticipating. I mean, it averages out to $15 a year. We know that NFL contracts and the NFL cap to a large degree are funny money, but you still want to spend as little as you possibly can to get the best player that you possibly can. And it does appear that he came in under market. It does appear that he wanted to continue his career here, that was a goal, because otherwise I don't think he takes a contract that would have been under market. I do believe there would have been other teams that would have stepped up for him. We'll find out more sort of in the postmortem of the whole thing. But if you look at it, it looks like, at least, okay, the Dolphins got a good deal. Now, he's a player who, like a lot of offensive linemen, has had trouble staying healthy. I mean, that is part of the position. And if he ends up being out for half the season or put on IR at some point, then everybody's going to be like, look at that. But this is not a Will Fuller. Like, last year, they basically gave Will Fuller $10 million for 1 year because they had to do something with that money, or they felt they did. They needed to add a big play option. They knew Fuller was going to miss the first game of the next season anyway. They knew that he was injury prone. They knew they had an injury prone wide receiver room. And so pretty much the wide receiver room played out like we expected, right? Except for the fact that Waddle, I think, was even better than could have anticipated, wrong role or not, okay, as your first round pick. But Parker was hurt. Okay, we knew that would happen. Preston Williams was hurt. Albert Wilson, maybe because of injury, was ineffective. And then, obviously Fuller was useless. I mean, he had 4 catches for $10 million. So that was a case where, okay, you knew kind of what you were getting and you did it anyway. Now, in this case, look, any offensive lineman is going to be prone to injury. It just happens. Okay. Armstead's gone through seasons of his career where he has not missed a lot of time. And I just think you have to roll the dice on this. I mean, you are, and I said this before, and I can't go back on these things when the Dolphins do something that I want them to do and then say, oh, well, okay, now I'm going to change the rules and move the goalpost. That is what people do on Twitter all day long, by the way, all day long, whether they're evaluating the Heat, the Dolphins, or anything else. They move the goalposts. I'm not going to do that. They had to get this player. I said that on Twitter. I said that this is what the Heat would have done. Okay, the Heat overpaid for Kyle Lowry. They knew it at the time. They didn't want to give him the third year at that kind of money, but it's just the cost of doing business. There were other teams involved. They felt they needed the player. Jimmy wanted the player. They haven't had, no disrespect to Goran Dragic, who I love, but they haven't had a true point guard probably since Tim Hardaway, Jason Williams maybe for 2 years. And they felt they needed to get the player. And they got the player. And it's worked out. I mean, I know obviously Kyle has missed a lot of time for personal reasons, etc. And there's been times he hasn't shot as much as everybody wanted. But to me, at least, he's been what was expected. I had him averaging 13 and 8 this year. He's averaging 13 and 8. Okay. I mean, he's met expectations in my eyes. He hasn't blown them away, but he's met expectations. And so the Dolphins, the same point, they had to get this player because this allows others to fill in. There's certain players that you add that allow others to fit into their natural roles. Asking Austin Jackson to be a core tackle at this stage of his career obviously was not workable. They want to use Robert Hunt more at the guard position. It's clear. Okay. Kinley flopped, I guess, after a stronger start. You look at, Michael Dieter at the center. They still maybe need to address the center position, although he was a little bit better last year. I think the people are giving him credit for. And then, you look obviously, at you just don't want Jesse Davis playing ever again if you can avoid it. They had to do this. They had to get the player. And look, the next part of this, and this is what we'll talk to Louis Sung about when he comes on. The next part of this is it's hard to do things in free agency or offseason in a vacuum because you are concerned about what the other teams around you are doing. But you can't control most of those things. I mean, unless you're competing for the same player. And so I understand, okay, the Dolphin fans may say, well, we did all this stuff this offseason and we're probably going to end up with the same or worse record simply because of the influx of talent into the AFC. I mean, the AFC West is a murderer's row. It's a group of death right now. I mean, all the key quarterbacks in the AFC stayed, and then other guys came in, whether it was Russell Wilson or Matt Ryan. And so I understand that Dolphin fans, some of them are going to look around and be like, well, what are we doing anything for? Like, we can't compete with all those teams, but you can't operate like that. Like, you have to build the team that is the best possible team you can build with the resources that you have. What other teams do around you cannot affect you. For years and years and years, the Dolphins seemed to be affected by what the Patriots were doing to try to match up directly with the Patriots, but they weren't winning enough games against other teams for it to matter. You just have to build your roster. Do I think that this is an 11-12 win roster? No, I don't. I still don't think there's enough explosiveness on offense, and I have my questions about Tua going up another level. I think Tua is a solid NFL quarterback. That's my belief. I think his accuracy is his gift. I think his accuracy will be even better now that he doesn't need to get rid of the ball like as soon as he drops back. Do I think he has the upside of some of the others around the league? I'm not sure about that. I mean, I would consider myself, I don't troll people like our friend Dono does, but I would consider myself somewhere closer to where Alex is, where I don't think he's the worst quarterback we've ever seen. I don't think he's the best quarterback we've ever seen. I think people who've staked out positions on those two sides are just doing it for attention at this point. That's where I'm at with it. I think you give him the resources around him to have the best chance for success, and I think you can win. And I think we saw that even when he didn't have the best resources, that he can improvise in certain ways to be effective. But is he ever going to be a 45 touchdown guy? I don't think that's what they're looking for. I think they're viewing it as, this guy came from San Francisco. In McDaniel, I think they're viewing it as, we got to a Super Bowl with Jimmy Garoppolo. Tua could probably be as good or better as Jimmy Garoppolo if I can surround him with the right pieces. I think that's where we're at. All right, we're going to bring on Lewis here in a second. Before we do, though, I want to tell you about another great sponsor, 5 Reasons Sports Networks, our friends over at All Pro Construction Builders. We told you in water cleanup what happens when things fall down, okay? And certainly you need to reach out to them. All Pro Construction Builders is also for your preparation, okay? You've got to reach out to All Pro Construction, okay, to basically, get the storm windows done, okay? Hurricane season around the corner. You got to protect your home or business. Make sure to contact All Pro Construction. They specialize in impact windows and doors for residential and commercial properties. Again, this is further to the south. So we told you about water cleanup. They service further to the north for what they do. All Pro Construction Builders services Dade. They serve us Monroe. But also, they do service Broward, too, so you can reach out to them as well. For residential and commercial properties, they do the impact windows and doors. They're state-certified, licensed, and insured general contractors, so they service Miami-Dade, as I said, and Monroe and Broward. Only locally made products, American-made, and they're family-owned and operated. So reach out to them. Mention 5 Reasons. You'll get a 10% discount. Reach out to Danny directly, 305-484-4429. That's 305-484-4429. 4429. The IG is All Pro Construction Builders. Check them out today, and the website is going to be up soon. All right, let's get to our guy, Louis Sung. You can find him at Louis D. Sung on Twitter. You can find him awake this morning with that very good hat. I'm going to get into the grading part of this and everything else. But I feel like what happened in this free agency is what typically happens, which is that Dolphin fans are waiting for the anvil to drop all the time on them, like to be disappointed. So it felt almost like with the Terran Armstead signing that it was relief as much as anything else. Like some celebrations you got to tackle, but some relief that the Dolphins acknowledged the need, right? I mean, that's kind of how it played out to me.
Well, everybody was starting to assume, I think, that the Miami Dolphins were just going to stand pat. They weren't very serious about chasing Lyle Collins, which it's funny because I do recall, I believe it was Alfredo Arteaga, who had even said that Collins wasn't necessarily a fit for the offensive blocking scheme that Mike McDaniel was bringing. Mm-hmm. So the obsession with Lyle Collins, I think, was more about the name, the reputation, than it was about the actual fit with the scheme. But I get it, because even if he's not a fit for the scheme, Lyle Collins is miles better than anything that Jesse Davis would put at right tackle. So I understand the stress level there. But yes, it is very relieving to see that they're actually acknowledging the fact that their offensive line is not good enough. And they acknowledge that neither Austin Jackson or Liam Eichenberg are good enough to handle the left tackle position. Maybe they can end up getting the right tackle between the two of them. If that's the case, then credit to Mike McDaniel for making it happen. I personally am not convinced that either one of them is starter level material, at least not right off the bat. But you would like to see if all these offensive line coaches combined cannot manage to get even one of these young guys to actually look serviceable, then we got to look at some of the scouting in there, because something must be wrong.
Can't they consider moving Robert Hunt out there?
I mean,
trying to fill the guard another way?
They could, but the thing about it is that if either way, you're still going to have faith that they're managing to develop some of their guys. Because if you move Robert Hunt out to right tackle, which he did look good, don't get me wrong. People saying that he's going to be an all-pro guard, but he was a good right tackle. Okay, well, a good right tackle is what we need right now. But if that's the case, then you better hope and pray that Durval Cures Neto, I don't even know if he's still on the roster even at this point.
Mhm.
He's been that poor little international slot for so long, or Solomon Kindley or somebody along those lines develops, because somebody has to take that right guard spot. Because if you move Hunt to right tackle, then what are you doing? Are you moving Jesse Davis? Are you flipping them? I don't want Jesse Davis there either. Jesse Davis, at best, should be your backup at any of the positions. He can play anywhere. That's where his value is, as a backup who can be a warm body at a position and hold down the line until somebody gets back. He's never supposed to be starter material. We all assumed last year that's what his role would be. And then he was thrust into the starting position because apparently Brian Flores didn't want to give any of the young bucks a real actual shot at the job.
Yeah, and that's fair. And I think, again, what you're doing here by adding the anchor is you're limiting your risk with the others, right? Like like we see, you only need one to pop. Like that's it. Like you don't need three to pop like last year. We talked about it many times. I mean, the biggest mistake that they made, and whether it was a Flores mistake or a Greer mistake, was not getting a veteran anchor on that line. And now not only have they gotten one, but they've gotten an elite one, provided that he's healthy. And so this is a major change. And we've seen over the years when they have that left tackle. I know Jake Long's career didn't last as long here as people had hoped, but when they had it, the rest of the line could fill in. That they had, they were able to add, whether it was Justin Smiley or Jake Grove. And I know some of those didn't work out as well as they wanted also because of health or other reasons, but there were times that they looked like they had a competent offensive line. All right, so let's bring it back to Tua then, because there was always such talk. Well, what matters most with Tua is the right tackle because he's left-handed. Teddy's not left-handed. That's another conversation here. But
we're going there.
Well, we may. I mean, but there, and I know that's not the reason for this. But Tua is left-handed, and so there was a feeling that the left tackle doesn't mean as much. In your view, though, we've seen the pressure against Tua comes from everywhere. It's not just one spot, right? So, I mean, was that overplayed a little bit?
I don't think it's overplayed in the sense that, yeah, he's a left-handed quarterback, so the blind spot is the right tackle. But listen, when, like you said, when he's having pressure at every single spot, when he's coming from the middle, coming from the sides, any kind of improvement on that line, any type of relief in the pressure, if all else fails, I tweeted this out, if all else fails, Tua can at least safely roll to his left. Mm-hmm. And then he'll be able to avoid that pressure that is keep coming for him. So you have Connor Williams at left guard, and I get it. The holding is an issue. Hopefully we'll be able to fix that this upcoming season. Mm-hmm. Teron Armstead at left tackle, just like that, instantly, it becomes so much better. Like running to the left is going to be successful. I'm skeptical about running to the right, but we'll see what happens with that. But that being said, yes, right tackle is still a concern because we don't know who it's going to be. Because we saw what Austin Jackson and Liam Eichenberg did. Wasn't great, but we also know that Lemuel Jean-Pierre was not a good offensive line coach overall. So now he's accepted his role, taken a step back as an assistant, which is just fine with me. Like, listen, dude, as long as you're not the guy who is in charge, you got to learn somewhere, so be my guest. So that's fine. It doesn't bother me. So
and I'm fine with all that too. I mean, this idea that you can't have him on the staff anywhere. I mean, I think having somebody on the staff who's worked with some of these guys and can at least impart some of that to the new offensive line coach, as long as there's not friction. And if you accept the job, you would assume there's not friction. I don't have any issue with that either. But let's pivot to the defense because. Again, I feel like, if you look on overall now, there were some things that were up in the air that ended up being solved. Like, for instance, Emmanuel Ogbah is back, and so that's a good thing. And essentially the entire defense is back, even some like the Brandon Scarletts of the world that we didn't necessarily anticipate that they would prioritize, but they were able to bring everybody back without it hurting their pursuit of getting at least one quality offensive lineman, or two, I guess you could say, but one elite guy. And then, also getting a couple of running backs and a couple of fullbacks and keeping Gesicki on board. So, I mean, they're really, and they haven't traded X at this point, right? And they haven't had a need to. Byron Jones is still there, right? So, I mean, there's not a lot to complain about unless you don't think this is a good defense, right? Like, I mean, it feels like Mike McDaniel came in and basically said, this is a good defense. Like, I want to keep most of the coaches. I want to keep most of the players. We want to see how Phillips develops. We want to bring back Agba. We've got Javon Holland. Like, I mean, this is the one thing I think everybody's overlooking is as we're talking about all the great quarterbacks that are coming in. The Dolphins defense should still be one of the better defenses in the AFC, shouldn't it?
It should, but once again, we're gonna run into the same situation that we run into every time there's a coaching change. How much of it was this person, and how much of it was this other person? Right. Josh Boyer is the defensive coordinator. He was the defensive coordinator last year. So did something change? No. Technically speaking, on paper, nothing changed. But Gerald Alexander, we don't know how much of an influence he had. If you ask his wife, he had all the influence. If you ask anybody else in that building, he was like, yeah, he helped, but he wasn't the reason they were good. Brian Flores, rumors that he took over. They eventually got debunked. I think it was Boyer himself who said, no, I was calling plays the whole time. Mm-hmm. Again, is he lying? Maybe. We don't know. We'll never know the answer to that. But so we'll see what happens with that. But on paper, at least, there's no reason the defense should take a step back simply because, yeah, all the players that we needed, they're back. Even guys that we didn't necessarily need are back. Brendan Scarlett, Sam Agwavon. We didn't need Sam Agwavon back, but they brought him back. Brendan Scarlett, we didn't need him back, but they brought him back. The idea is that the defense, yes, remains intact. So now all you have to do is just keep running the same doggone scheme. And let's not pretend that they're not going to add more pieces. I don't think they're going to be looking at a Bobby Wagner. Well, that would be awesome, though. But nevertheless, there's no reason why this defense should take a step back unless offenses have already started to look at the film and be like, okay, this is where their weak spot is, and they just start pinpointing certain spots that they can start
but Louis, there's not a lot of age on the defense either. So there's not guys that are going to fall off a cliff like we've seen in recent years. Like you wouldn't think. I mean, Agba's in his prime. Phillips is, Phillips and Holland, I mean, or haven't come close to their prime yet, right? I mean, so it's just, X is still playing at a high level. I mean,
we haven't reached the point of the offseason yet where Howard is going to be griping about his contract. So let's see.
That's coming. There's no question about that. There's no question about that. I mean, that's the last thing I think that they're going to have to sort of deal with here. But yeah, I mean, Brandon Jones. I mean, you're talking. I mean, it's a young core. Robert Baker, who is signed. I mean, they have players who are kind of, they're either, they're ascending into their primes or they're in their primes, and they don't have anybody who's going to go like that. So, they should be a good defense. Like you mentioned, the defensive coordinator is the same. I am not of the mind, no matter how good a position coach is, I am not of the mind that a position coach determines the fate of the overall unit. I mean, I think a lot of times it's a comfort level with that particular group. But that's the most talented group on the team, in my view, and I think they're going to be fine. Like I don't think Javon Holland is going to suddenly be a bad player or X is going to be a bad player because they don't have Gerald Alexander around. I don't know. I mean, I think offensive line coaches of all the position coaches matter the most because of the way that unit needs to come together. And the Dolphins have had a very great variance of offensive line coaches over the years, but I'm not as much on the DB. All right, so let's finish here. And thanks to our sponsors, Water Cleanup of Florida and Alt Pro Construction Builders. So now that it is, I know it's never done, and we still got the draft, obviously, and you still got June 1st cuts, and you still got a whole bunch of stuff that's coming up. But overall, now where they are to this point, how do you grade them?
Well, with the signing of Teron Armstead, I'm going to give them a B+. The reason I give them a B+ is simply because there are a lot of talented players out there that are still available that they don't seem interested in. I'm seeing things like, DK Metcalf is available. Like, let's go. I would not mind. Somebody actually threw this out there, and I thought, you know what? That's actually not a bad idea. If they're looking to move DK Metcalf, if the Seahawks are going full rebuild mode, I would absolutely try to jump on that. Metcalf is a ridiculous talent. Like, I understand he's a personality. You got to deal with that. But I mean, that's the job of the coaching staff, right? You deal with those situations. He's not like he's Antonio Brown crazy. He's just a little, Right. So, but Metcalf, if you could put this on a list, if you could have Devontae Parker or DK Metcalf, which one do you want? Just
Right.
so if you could trade Parker and mid or early round draft pick for Metcalf, I'd call that a win right there. Because then you get DK Metcalf, Jalen Waddle, and then you have of course. I honestly don't think they're going to get much out of Preston Williams, but you can add him there if you want to. The new guy from the Cowboys, I'm blanking, it's still early. Cedric Wilson. Cedric Wilson, yes. So you add all these extra pieces, and of course, there's still the draft to go. I would absolutely not mind whatsoever if the Dolphins spent their first round draft pick on another weapon, because now that my next wish list for the Dolphins this free agency, because I know they still have money. Listen, they can reconstruct contracts all they want. It's a very easy thing. The Saints have already proved it. The Packers have proved it. All you have to do is just get rid of net.
Yeah, the cap is not real. We know that.
It's not an issue for them. So if they go and sign JC Treader, which I don't know if they're going to do, everybody's linking him to the Dolphins because I think it's wishful thinking. I don't know if there's any actual real pursuit on their part. But oh my God, if they manage to get Treader, I would go from a B+ to an A+, because like that was the biggest concern for me was, can you fix the offensive line? And with the addition of Treader, the only thing that we could do at that point would be maybe sign like a Cornelius Lucas. Maybe he's either he can maybe start at right tackle because I'm told he's actually pretty good, or he can be the new swing tackle in place of Jesse Davis, and we can send Jesse packing. But either way, that's my next wish list. All we ever wanted all offseason long was just fix that line. Nothing else matters. And so far, they've done pretty much everything they can do. They got Armstead. They fixed the left guard position. So, yeah, I get it. Get a center in free agency, and the draft becomes BPA. That's the dream, right? Always being able to pick whoever the best player is available, regardless of the position.
Yeah, and I recommend people check out Michael Quirk's piece about taking BPA in the draft. That's on 5reasonsports.com right now. All right, Louis, we appreciate it. Follow him at Louis D. Sung. Thanks to Manny Chang for producing. Our sponsors, Water Cleanup, Florida.com, and also All Pro Construction Builders. Have a good day, everybody.